Welcome back to Malt Mondays. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Rather than reviewing a specific bottle of whiskey, I'm going to be talking about an event that I got to go to yesterday. It was an industry-only Glenfiddich Tasting. And what that means is it was closed to the public. It was a little bit different than a normal tasting where you would be kind of explained to, oh, what's the difference between bourbon? What's the difference between scotch? They actually understood, okay, are the people that are here already know about this product to some extent. So we're going to get into a little more of the technical details surrounding it. And that was really interesting for me because, you know, there were certain questions that I had that you can't exactly just look up on Glenfiddich's website as far as their production process, what types of barley they use, etc., etc. So I figured I would share a little bit of that information with you in this video and talk about the whiskeys that we tasted. And then if you have any further questions, feel free to shoot me a question in the comments and I will respond. I'll just briefly go over the whiskeys that we tasted. We did the 12-year-old Glenfiddich, the 14-year-old bourbon barrel, which is one of their new releases last year, I believe. The 15-year-old Solera, the 18, and their IPA cask from the experimental collection. Now, I'll start off, if you've watched my Glen Grant 16-year-old video, I hate on Glenfiddich a little bit. And that's because I think the 12-year-old's boring. It's not bad, it's certainly smooth whiskey, and it has nice flavors there. There's nothing bad about it. I just think it's bland and forgettable. And unfortunately, because of that, I've never really gone out of my way to try Glenfiddich's other products. I'm a little sad that I haven't in the past because I tried the 14-year-old and it's fantastic. It's really nice. It's sweet vanilla, caramel tones, really smooth. And I think partly that's because they've done a little bit of an interesting process with it. In addition to doing 11 years in bourbon barrels, rather than doing straight bourbon, which can end up giving you like a little bit of an overripe banana-y flavor that I don't like in whiskey, they've then, for the last 3.5 years, 46 months to be exact, they've put it in new oak barrels. So they lightly toast the barrels for 40 minutes, and they transfer the whiskey into those barrels for 46 months, let it sit, and what that does is it actually brings out almost a fresh bourbon flavor rather than the leftover old bourbon flavor. And it's fantastic. Especially, I think it costs $45, maybe it's $55. Really good stuff. The next thing that we did was the Solera 15. Again, kind of a boring whiskey. The process is certainly interesting. The way they only ever let the Solera vat get halfway empty before refilling it, which makes it their most consistent product. It's nice, but it costs like $65 or $70. And at that price point, I'm just going to buy a bottle of Macallan. I don't really see the 15 years of age bringing much to it to justify that it costing double what the 12-year-old costs. We did the 18-year-old, which I had never tried before. It tasted like cinnamon apple, baking spices, almost like an apple pie with some of those like custard flavors in there. Really good whiskey. They also bottle it at 43%, so it's one of the few Glenfiddichs that's bottled above 40. And the ABV helps a lot with the mouthfeel. You know, it feels richer. It's really quite nice. And I think it normally runs around $90, $100. So at that price point, I think it's definitely worth picking up. It's definitely good whiskey. Then we did the IPA. And I was expecting it to be extremely bitter because IPAs are very bitter beers. Well, it was actually kind of sweet up front. I got like bubblegum, cotton candy flavors. And the finish is where that bitterness came in. I don't know that I would necessarily say it was really good, but it was definitely different. And at $70 a bottle, I would definitely say try it before you buy it. It's not going to taste like what you expect it to, and it's definitely different than any other scotch you've tasted. So find it at a bar, find a friend that's got one, try it. before you drop that much money on it. But that being said, it was definitely still delicious whiskey. Just odd. And then we got to ask her, some questions about Glenfiddich, and whatnot. She talked a little bit about the next bottling that they're bringing out, the 20, or it's with 2 X's, so XX or 20 is what they call it, where they had all 20 global ambassadors picked out a cask, blended it together. So it's got port barrels, it's got wine, it's got bourbon, all sorts of different weird cask finishes, so to speak, in it. And I'm really looking forward to trying that at some point, just because the IPA cask was so interesting. And I've actually, I've kind of hated on Glenfiddich in the past, but some of their other bottlings are quite nice. So she talked about that, and it may already be available in some areas, I'm not sure. And then she talked a little bit about, not every distillery does this, but Glenfiddich uses the same new make spirit for all their bottling. So the exact same stuff goes into the barrel for the 12, 14, 15, 18, 21, 25, until you get to some of the older expressions that have peat in them. And we actually found out that the reason some of the older Glenfiddich bottlings have peat is because during World War II, they had to use peat. And for a while after, actually, they had to use peat. The government wouldn't allow them to use wood for their fires because they needed wood and coal for the war and for rebuilding and whatnot. So I thought that was fascinating. I'd never heard that before. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on that I thought was really cool was barrel sharing. Something interesting that they do, and I'd never thought about, is, when a blend like Johnny Walker or Famous Grouse buys barrels from distilleries, I had always assumed that, they buy a barrel of Glenfiddich and a barrel of this, and then they blend it together themselves, ship it out. Well, what actually happens is the barrels are all aged at their respective distilleries, until Johnny Walker wants them. But what actually happens is, to protect their product, Glenfiddich will go ahead and blend their new make spirit with someone else's before they put it in the barrel. And that prevents the bottlers from stealing Glenfiddich's brand. It keeps them from buying barrels of Lagavulin and selling it as their own product when it's actually Lagavulin's product. And I had always assumed that, all the barrels of Glenfiddich were just Glenfiddich, but actually a lot of them are blended with other whiskeys already and then aged before they're sold into blends. So I thought that was really fascinating. And if you've got any questions regarding Glenfiddich, the history of it, whatever, some of the more technical details surrounding the whiskeys, the breakdowns of how much is aged in bourbon versus sherry, those are all details I learned, and I'd love to share with you. Just leave a question in the comments. I will respond as quickly as I can. So thank you for watching, and please like, share, subscribe to this video, and come back for more reviews. Thanks.